to the doctors. Today on our show we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Mark Emery, and he's here to talk to us about his best-selling book, A World Without Cannabis. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, and we have plenty of questions today about your book.
It's great to be here, and thanks for having me. For those who are unfamiliar, cannabis is the group of chemicals from the cannabis sativa plant that date back in history nearly 5,000 years. It has been used for medicine, spirituality, and recreation. My new book addresses how the world would have been different if cannabis had never existed.
Well, my first question for you today is, how did the use of cannabis come about in history?
Well, you may actually be surprised to find out that the earliest documented references of cannabis use in medicine date back to 2700 BC China under Emperor Sen Nuang. Their other early cannabis references date back to the 2nd millennium BC and in the royal library of an Assyrian king in 650 BC. Greek historian Herodotus described people on islands that meet together, throw cannabis on a fire, then sit in a circle inhaling the fruit that has been thrown on and become intoxicated, just as the Greeks do wine. A study in the South African Journal of Science also showed that pipes dug up in William Shakespeare's garden in Stratford had traces of cannabis on it. Who knows how different all of these cultures and people would have been had cannabis never been around.
I never knew that the cannabis dated back as far as that and is widely used. Some may say that Shakespeare writing would never be as good, or that Chinese dynasties might have fallen. Well, tell me more about the chemistry behind the drug.
Well, Richard, the cannabis drug is actually made up of more than 60 cannabinoids, or 21 carbon molecules, but the only one that is highly psychoactive and in a large quantity is tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC. THC has a molecular mass of 314.45 grams per mole, very low solubility in water, and has a boiling point of 156 degrees Celsius. The cannabinoids are in a class of chemicals called terpenoids, which occur as oils in plants and sometimes involved in the formation of vitamins, steroids, pigments, and odors. Terpenes are linear like citronella or cyclic like THC. The psychoactive properties of THC are mediated by the activation of the CB1 receptor in the brain. The body actually makes its own version of cannabinoids called endocannabinoids, which regulate almost all brain and body functions. This first successful attempt to isolate cannabinol, C21H26O2, was done by T.B. Wood in 1899. In order to receive a lethal dosage of THC, a human subject must smoke 1,500 pounds of cannabis in 15 minutes.
15,000 pounds? Last time I tried, I only got half a pound before I passed out. I'm not really much of a chemist myself, Mark, but I think what you're going to try and say was that our brains wouldn't function without cannabis. We're going to have to take a quick break, though, because on today's show we have a side reporter, Michael Phelps, with us. Michael is doing a short special on fun facts about cannabis. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Dick. I have for you guys some fun facts about cannabis and our culture. In a 2006 federal government study, data shows that cannabis is now the most valuable crop in the United States with a value of $14 billion. Cannabis production has increased tenfold since 1980. The Smithsonian Institute says 11 presidents, including Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Lincoln, JFK, and Obama, all used cannabis. Lincoln writes, "Two of my favorite things are sitting on my front porch, smoking a pipe of sweet hemp, and playing my Hohner harmonica." The Declaration was even written on a piece of hemp paper. Jack Johnson, the Beatles, Al Gore, John Edwards, Steve Martin, Brad Pitt, and Neil Young are all admitted users of cannabis. Pictures of me with a bong were even on the front page of newspapers, and I won 8 gold medals. Or was it 12? I can't even remember. I'll leave you with these 3 questions. Would our country's economy be as strong without cannabis? Would our leaders be as strong without cannabis? And would music be as good without cannabis? Back to you, Dick.
Thanks, Mike. That was a fun segment. I think I would like the world better with cannabis. Now back to what we were talking about before. I've only been hearing of all this hype about medical marijuana and whether or not it's an actual medicine or just another way to buy illegal drugs. Enlighten me behind this topic.
Well, like I touched on before, Richard, cannabis has been used for medicine for nearly 5,000 years. Cannabis was recommended for treatment of malaria, constipation, absent-mindedness, and female disorders. The Chinese recommended mixing cannabis resin with wine in their pain relievers during surgery because of its anesthetic properties. In India, cannabis has been recommended to quicken the mind, lower fevers, induce sleep, cure dysentery, stimulate appetite, improve digestion, relieve headaches, and cure venereal diseases. Today, certain tribes treat snake bites and smoke cannabis prior to childbirth. Cannabis is one of very few drugs that increases appetite and decreases nausea, and is the only one who has the side effect of euphoria, making it the perfect drug to treat cancer patients. I would much rather suggest cannabis to one of my patients than 5 other drugs, each with their own side effects. Cannabis can help patients with Alzheimer's, anorexia, AIDS, arthritis, cancer, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, glaucoma, migraines, and spasticity. The use of cannabis medicine was replaced with synthetic drugs such as barbiturates, aspirin, and opiates, which can be far more dangerous and addicting and can cause overdoses. When consumed out of a vaporizer or baked into food, cannabis has little or no harmful chemicals or carcinogens. No one has ever overdosed from cannabis.
So where do I sign up to get some of this medical cannabis?
Well, it actually doesn't work that way, Richard. You actually need a card from a registered doctor that says you actually have one of these diseases.
Well, I have Crohn's disease, so that works for me. I assume that cannabis has been used as a religious drug as well. Am I correct about that?
Yes, Richard, that was my next point. Similar to how wine has been used in Christianity, cannabis has been used in many religions for rituals and ceremonies. Hindus use the drug in as early as 1000 BC and consume it during rituals observing Shiva. In Christianity and Judaism, the holy anointing oil mentioned in the Old Testament had cannabis as one of its main ingredients. Cannabis is the 4th most popular mind-altering drug, only behind caffeine, alcohol, and nicotine. In 1969, the United Nations estimated that there were between 200 and 250 million cannabis users in the world. Without cannabis, these users would most likely switch to more addictive and more dangerous recreational drugs like cocaine, ecstasy, LSD, and alcohol.
Well, we're going to have to wrap this up, but I would like to thank you for your appearance today and remind our viewers that A World Without Cannabis is now on sale at bookstores nationwide.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, Richard.
Anytime.
Roll another blunt. Yeah. Oh, good. La da 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 da. La da